Welcome to the next installment in my video lecture series for managerial economics. And in this particular video, we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 17, Q&A 2. And as you can see here, I'm using the application OmniGraph Sketcher again for this because this is graphically an intensive particular problem, and it's just more convenient for me, and I think it's easier, and it makes it easier for individuals to understand if I use the OmniGraph Sketcher application for this. So let me actually read the actual Q&A for you straight from the textbook. How does a quota set by the United States on foreign sugar imports affect the total American supply curve for sugar, given that the domestic supply curve, SD, in panel A of the graph, and the foreign supply curve, SF, in panel B? So I've changed this around a little bit from what it is in your textbook. I thought it would be easier to understand if I place this all on one graph instead of having three separate panels in a graph. So we have the domestic supply of sugar here. We have the foreign supply of sugar. And the total supply is just the summation, the horizontal summation of the foreign supply of sugar and the domestic supply of sugar. So we can see that here that ST is just SD and SF added together. And just to illustrate to you that point, if we are at this price here, the foreign supply is equal to 3, the domestic supply is equal to 5, so 5 plus 3 is equal to 8, or we can add 3 from this point here, 1, 2, 3. So we can see that this is a summation of these two supply curves. Now the interesting thing here is that there's going to be a quota placed on foreign produced sugar, and we want to take a look at what's going to be the impact on the foreign supply because of that. So if we draw a vertical line at QQ, which is the quota quantity, is probably the best way to put it, that gives us an indication of how the foreign supply curve is going to be changed, because once we get to that QQ, the quota amount, there will be no foreign supply of sugar. So in essence, once we get to that quota amount, the foreign supply of sugar is going to be vertical at the quota amount. So it's going to put a kink in the foreign supply curve, and it's going to end up looking like that. So I've denoted this as SFAQ, which doesn't stand for frequently asked questions, but for supply foreign after the quota. So you can see here that we're going to have a kink, and this is going to be caused by the fact that a quota was put in place. So now we have a kink in the foreign supply curve. That once the supply curve is positively sloped until we get to the quota amount, and then it's vertical at the quota amount. So the imposition of the quota is going to place a kink on the foreign supply curve. The original foreign supply curve was linear here. The imposition of the quota makes the foreign supply curve look like that. So once we realize that the quota is going to impact the foreign supply curve, and we realize that the total supply is equal to foreign supply plus domestic supply, we're going to end up getting a kink in the total supply curve because of the imposition of the quota. So what we want to get from this is we want to find out the price where the quota amount intersects the foreign supply. Because when we transpose that price, and once we figure out that price, if we bring that over to supply total, that will tell us where the kink in the supply total curve is going to occur. So where we have an intersection of that price, that hashed line that's horizontal, that right there that I have being highlighted right here, where that intersects the supply total, that's going to give us the point where the kink is going to occur. So let's take a look at that, and you can see here we now have a kink in the total supply curve, and as you can see I've denoted that as the supply curve total after the quota, and that is going to be equal to that and that. So we have the supply curve here, and then we have a kink because of the imposition of the quota, so that that red line with the black dotted hash marks through it is going to give us our supply total after the quota is put in place. And the thing that you need to realize is the explanation for that is that the section below this price here, so we got the price where the quota amount intersected the foreign supply curve. At that price is where the kink in the total supply curve is going to occur. And realize that for prices below that price, where the quota intersects the foreign supply curve, that the total supply curve is going to be the summation of the foreign supply and the domestic supply. Once we reach that price where we've reached the quota for the imports, the operational part of the demand curve where the kink occurs is going to be here. So let me highlight that for you. And for prices above that, only the domestic supply curve is the one that's operational. So make sure you realize that the imposition of the quota, one, impacts the foreign supply curve. And because total supply is the summation of foreign supply and domestic supply, that placing that kink in the foreign supply will also place a kink in the total supply curve. And that for prices below where the quota kicks in, where the quota amount intersects the foreign supply curve at that price, for prices below that, the total supply curve is going to be the foreign and the domestic supply curve. And for prices above that, it is only going to be the domestic supply curve.